today as we experience Nimdzi Live, where we talk about the latest and greatest in translation, localization, internationalization, culturalization, and all that fun stuff global companies need to delight their international customers. On this program, we like to invite guests who like to have fun and have some value to add for our audience of globalization professionals. I'm always eager to provide a platform to those with a good story or a good data set. So let us know if there are any topics you would like covered or guests that we should reach out to for future episodes. If you haven't already done so, make sure that you are subscribed to Nimdzi Insights or following Nimdzi Insights on your platform of choice. We are coming to you live today on LinkedIn, Facebook, X, and YouTube. Of course, you can head on over to our YouTube channel. All of our past episodes are over there, as well as our episodes are available in podcast format wherever you get your podcasts: Apple Podcast, Amazon Podcast, Spotify, all of that good stuff. So today, without further ado, without any plugs today, I think I'm just going to jump right into it. Today, we have a really exciting guest here that I'm excited to talk to. Talking about some stuff that's near and dear to my heart when it comes to entrepreneurship. So I'll just go ahead and kick it off here. Entrepreneurship is a journey that often requires skills and mindsets we weren't taught growing up. In this episode, we are going to talk to Joshua, who shares his personal story of navigating the challenges of building and scaling businesses, from his upbringing in a working class family to becoming a trusted fractional COO, which we're going to be talking about what that is. We'll explore the evolving complexities of running a successful business, the mindset shifts needed to thrive as a founder, and practical insights and strategies for addressing growing pains while planning for long-term success. Joshua, welcome to Nimdzi Live. It's good to have you, sir.
Hey, thanks, Sucker. I really appreciate the chance to be here.
Yeah, it's good to have you. I'll just give a quick introduction to you here. Joshua is a seasoned fractional COO with over 20 years of leadership experience across industries like food and beverage, finance, manufacturing, and economic development. Specializing in operations audits, process mapping, and EOS. I've always read that, and I've never actually had to say it out loud. Do you say it EOS or is it EOS?
They say EOS, but
It kind of sounds the same, doesn't it?
you have to be certified, so
Oh,
I
okay.
probably should. I help with the process if you read the book. Let's just say that.
Okay, sounds good. Anyway, EOS integration. Joshua helps businesses scale effectively, focusing on companies with $500K to $5 million in revenue. As the former director of economic development for the Eugene area Chamber of Commerce, he spearheaded initiatives that created 600 jobs and generated over $3 million in economic activity. When he's not optimizing workflows or mentioning CEOs, Joshua enjoys permaculture, gardening, culinary arts, and quality time with his family. Quite a well-rounded individual.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that.
Well,
I worked at it.
as fascinating as permaculture is, I'm next month I'll be getting married to a landscape designer, and so maybe she can have you on her podcast. But as fascinating as that stuff is, I want to talk about the work that you do, particularly around helping businesses grow. You're right in that niche, or like right in that niche where my company, Nimdzi, is, frankly, that, $500,000 to $5 million range. Yeah. And frankly, I've worked for big companies. I've worked for tiny companies. The middle, that up to 5 million, up to 10 million, that's a challenging. There's a lot of challenges in that space because you don't have the resources to do it the way that the big companies do. You don't have the clout, you don't have the reputation, you don't have the resources, but also you can't get away with being a scrappy startup anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's when you talk about mindset shifts, that's where, the team that got you here, the skills, the background, the everything, it gets you to a certain point, and then you've got to learn a new set of skills where you have to have a new playbook for kind of that next phase. And it's usually right around that million mark is when people keep hitting the wall, not realizing that the work and effort that they had to do previously to kind of give them a ramp to reach a higher point on that mountain, they're kind of attacking it at the wrong plane. Like they have to kind of take a few steps back, put processes in place, and then rework their trajectory to kind of move up. And yeah, it's a challenge, but I enjoy it. I find that the passion, the reason why the people started the business, that's still there.
Yeah.
The clients are still there.
The
Service
founders are
delivery.
still around, right?
Yeah.
They haven't
Yeah.
completely sold out yet.
Well, and they haven't completely given control over to everybody. They've got a few key team members. They've got a few good processes, but that coherent engine that runs without the owner always being the bottleneck or always being the person to manage and check and push everything. They're just at the stages of doing that and handing things off and having the machine run without them touching all the parts.
And that's a big challenge for a lot of, we work with a lot of translation companies, smaller to mid-sized to large. And that's a big challenge. A lot of owner operator, right, founder CEO type roles when you look at some of these companies. And it's always a challenging transition for the founder to transition away from running the show. I mean, heck,
Right.
Elon Musk still thinks he's running the show, right? You know what I'm saying?
By the way, he's the exception to
He's the exception
any
to
of the,
all of the rules.
Yeah, exactly. Don't run more than one business. Don't run
Right.
more than hat. Those kind of things. Don't get involved in politics. Sorry, I went there. But
yeah. Oh, well, we made it 3 minutes before we started talking about politics. That was my fault. I brought it up. But what advice would you have? Because you've worked with a lot of different CEOs in this position. What advice would you have for a founder CEO who's, here's a question for you.
Go ahead.
If you're advising a founder CEO and you've audited, and we're going to look at the framework because you have a beautiful framework here for analyzing these companies. But you've done an audit process, whatever, mapping of a company. And you, as a consultant, have identified that Mr. CEO man or Miss CEO woman is quite frankly the problem that's holding the company back from the next level. How would you have that? Don't laugh. This has happened, right?
Oh,
I'm not asking you to name names, right?
Yeah, I just tell the CEO, I'm like, hey, listen, can you just point to the bruises on your head? And
okay,
then
so
can just
you take that approach.
Yeah, they're just like, it's right there. Now, yeah, that is a hard conversation, and I think that's part of with my process trying to identify like who I can help. I can only help people that want to be helped and that are willing to allow me into the playground. And I very much, and the initial calls and conversation with people, if you've got a business problem, a team problem, pick anything with the business, essentially it boils down to at some point it's a leadership problem. And so if the person gets offended and is like, no, my sales team's terrible and I just need to fire them, or my marketing agency, whatever, okay, you're the one that set the culture to be that way. You're the one that allowed them to get away with this. So at some point you have to realize like, okay, maybe I'm the one that is setting the strategy, the pace, the culture. And so once we have that conversation, then they feel a little bit more comfortable, like, okay, I know I need to work on things, but then what else can I do in the meantime to work on the rest of this? And so it's a little bit like trying to do some damage assessment. The house is on fire, it's burning down right now. Like, what do we need to save? What do we need to focus on? How do we keep this from getting worse? Once the fire gets put out, then we can talk about 5-year planning and rebuilding and kind of restructuring. But generally when I'm brought in, there's an immediacy to what's going on.
Right.
And so getting the CEO to realize that. I mean, one of my best sales techniques is when I meet someone, they're like, house is on fire, I need help. Great, you want help? No, I got that. Okay. And I call them a month later. How are you doing? Yeah. Everything's still burning.
Yeah, well.
It's like, hey, if you're pulling out mushrooms, marshmallows and chocolate, and your team's pulling out graham crackers and they're making s'mores, they've obviously figured out how to deal with the situation, but you probably don't enjoy that very much.
Yeah, because you learn to live with it. Right? You learn to live with the inefficiencies. You learn to live with the toxic things that are going on, right? And it just kind of becomes normalized to a point where, and this is, and this is a big pitch. This is a good sales point for consultants like you and me, right? Because you need that third person perspective to come in. Right? Because you don't, if you're dealing with it every single day and every day gets a little bit worse, it's the frog in the boiling water analogy, right? You don't realize how bad it is.
And it's surprising. I mean, as a consultant, when you walk into an organization and you're like, by the way, your kitchen's on fire. And they're like, oh yeah, that's just the way it works.
Oh yeah. That's from the last IT guy.
Yeah.
He
yeah.
hasn't worked here 9 months. We'll get to it.
Yeah. You're like,
Yeah.
Do you think maybe you want to put that out? Or they're like, no, we enjoy the smoke. It's great.
Yeah.
Um, no, but I think most business owners, they tend, when it comes to hiring us, or even do they need us, or at what point do they need us? There's that kind of pain that they're going through, or there is are you falling on a passion of the work that you're doing? You started this because you were really excited for the work, you're doing it, but now your team's growing and there's a level of complexity and no one has managed that. And so by default, everything falls on you. And so you're working 60, 80 hours a week.
Right.
Your team's constantly giving you things. There's always putting out fires and problems. And, I think one of the challenges when they bring us on board, then we help them get that sorted. And then once that's all kind of calm and at peace, they grab a can of gasoline and matches, and they're like, because they're used to putting out fires and used to, putting out problems. And it's like, no, 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 we need you to take a strategic approach and like sit back, drink the coffee, think about what you want next. What's the vision? What's the purpose? And like, tell us what to do so we can do the next planning and next building
Well,
for you.
and it can be hard for, let's say, a founder, CEO, because the skills that they needed and they successfully employed to get from 0 to 1 million are different from the skills that they're going to need to get to 3 million to 5 million to 10 million, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you're 5 million, but you still want to use the same skill sets, then chances are you're probably in the weeds too much. But it can be scary to step back and say, because, and this is what I tell managers, not even owners, just managers all of the time, is, you need to become comfortable with imperfection to a certain extent when it comes to your team. Because you're going to hire someone to do something that you've done for the last 5 years, you're going to hire someone to do that. And are they going to do as good of a job as you? No, they're not.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
The reason you're the boss is because you're good at what you do. Right?
Well, and in their defense, like, they built this, right? Like,
It's their baby.
I mean, yeah, it's imagine if you built a car from scratch, right? You would know everything about that car. You would know every facet. You would know what needs to be replaced, how often. And, the idea of hiring somebody else to come in and take care of your baby, like, that's a tough one, especially when your livelihood's dependent on it, your
Right.
family and everything else. You don't want anybody else in there tinkering with it and messing things up.
Well, and that's a good point too, because as an owner, your mortgage is dependent upon this company, right?
Yeah.
And you can hire a team, you can hire a leadership team, and they might be an excellent leadership team, but they don't lose the farm if the company has 2 bad quarters in a row. You
Right.
do,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. And I think that's where I would say, understanding where the owner's position is and kind of what they're concerned about, like that's part of our job as a consultant too, is to come in and say, okay, listen, you built this beautiful company, you've got it to this place, you're working 80 hours a week, you're stressed out, you want to get it to the next stage of growth, you're missing some skill sets, that you're the bottleneck for a lot of this. Let's kind of break this down and figure out how we can start practicing some of those behaviors, right, that we need to give you back your time, and then eventually get some processes in place so everyone's playing from the same playbook, everything's in the same spot. And then you can actually take a few steps back from this and then build up that platform, of foundational operational elements you need. And then as you progress, you're moving at a better trajectory. And so you're going to hit your goals better, and not have to do it with you working at another 100 hours a week or some ungodly, stressful thing that's not sustainable.
Yeah, and that's the thing about being an entrepreneur or founder, whatever you want to call yourself, is the job is never done. I was just having this
Oh, no.
conversation yesterday with someone. Is when you're an employee, you can clock out at 5. Even if you're salaried, there's an end to the project. There's an end to the job description. When you're a founder, there's always something more you can be doing. It's like, okay, I finished all of my projects. I did everything on my to-do list. Time to do some marketing materials, time to book a podcast, there's always something more that you can be doing. And it can be hard to relax.
Oh,
Frankly.
I mean, personally, every time I get to a place where I'm like, okay, revenue's good, My pipeline seems to be okay, and I'm like, time to get the laurels out, and I try to get a little lay down on those. The pipeline dries up, and so then it's just like, oh man. And so I can watch it happen where it's like, okay, leads are slowing down, all of these things are happening, and in 2-3 months, guess what happens? It's there I am hustling again, working extra hours, pulling in extra time, because now, like a lot of these founders, I've got staff that I have to take care of, and I have to make sure they are getting compensated because they put in the work and they expect to get paid, and I can't just decide I'm going to eat ramen and so is everybody else and they're all going to have to wait. No, I have to make sure to at some level feed the beast of the business and keep the money coming.
Oh yeah, and I'm sure, it's not a unique experience to be the founder of a company and have periods of time at the minimum where the majority of your employees are making more money than you are.
Oh. So this
you got to make payroll, right?
Yeah. This reminds me of one of my clients. Yeah, she was like an interior designer, almost $1 million in revenue, working about, I don't know, 60, 80 hours a week. And when we did the calculations between the distributions and her salary that she paid herself like a really small salary. You take the number of hours that she worked, she was making $7 an hour.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey, listen, you could go get a job at like In-N-Out. I think it's paying like $15 an hour, or and you're gonna make twice as much money. You're gonna have insurance, you're gonna have health benefits, you're gonna have a work schedule, and none of this complaints.
Yeah. I mean, but that's the trade-off. There are a lot of great things about working for yourself, right?
There is.
I've got 3 kids, single dad. You know what I'm saying? Like I can go pick up my kids from school. I can do all of this stuff. I can take vacations. I don't have a boss telling me I can't use naughty words on live podcasts, right?
You can choose to wear pants or not to work.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
No comment for this podcast.
But I mean, there's definitely trade-offs, I think, with that lifestyle. So yes, there's like infinite flexibility, but then on the other end of that, then I have found that a lot of people that are struggling right now with entrepreneurship, or even in the fractional space, trying to get their fractional practice going, they're wrestling with entrepreneurship. It's like all of a sudden you're in an open field, and it's like, hey, there's sticks and rocks and leaves, like do whatever you want. And people are like, I don't know what that looks like. I'm so used to a playground that has everything's padded and everything is built in such a way I know exactly how to use it. But now I'm in this open field, like, what do I do and how do I do this? And
yeah. And I've been there. There's days when I crave a boss just to tell me this is what you need to do today.
Yeah. Right? Well, hire an operations person, and then you get kind of a pseudo boss.
Yeah, I
right?
had that. And that's what we did here at Nimdzi Insights. We hired me and my co-founder. We hired a CEO. That was years ago. Best decision we ever made, and he's doing a great job. Right. So we can do stuff like podcasting while he's off solving all the problems.
You do the real businessy stuff, and we're gonna do the fun part of the business. That's awesome.
Pretty much. I hope he's not watching this.
He's gonna renegotiate his salary.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you've mentioned a couple times this fractional business, so this is the space that you're in, and I'm kind of familiar with it. But for the sake of the people listening here, tell us what is this fractional leadership, fractional COO, fractional? Give me the spiel on that.
The spiel. All right. So basically, we are. There's actually a paper that was written, and it's posted on my profile about kind of what a fractional executive is and how they work and operate, kind of comparing against consultants or freelancers. Basically, the idea is that we are a part-time leadership position to come into the business and sit in with the CEO. Like, let's use a car analogy. We get in the front seat with the CEO as they're driving along, and we're giving advice, we're supporting them, we're helping them. Depending on the level of engagement, sometimes we'll even be allocated resources, team, etc. So instead of kind of experiencing that full-time COO or whatever C-suite position that you're picking, instead of having that person there full-time, fully engaged, creating a lot of work, creating a lot of engagement, they're there on a fractional basis or a part-time basis. And so the work that they do, they tend to focus on kind of like the power rule, the 80-20, 20% of what you do counts for 80% of the revenue.
Right.
They tend to focus on that 20%. Like, what are these power things that we can focus on and address? And it's a new kind of way of building out your workforce. With COVID happening, we accelerated the ability to work remotely. It wasn't new, it just everybody needed to, and so they figured out how to do it. So now, once you've gone remote, now you have access to people from all walks of life, from all different backgrounds. And so you don't necessarily have to hire that local person to do that one role. And you don't necessarily need that person full time, especially when you're a growing company.
Right.
You need some executive leadership, but you don't need it full time. This fractional space or fractional providers are great, because then they come in high level, they're already hitting the ground running, they already know, they care about your business, they're coming in at a pretty high level of investment and engagement, but they're focused on a very small piece of the puzzle, so it's not messing up your whole operations.
Right. And you don't necessarily, at this stage in a company's development, you don't necessarily need a chief operating officer full time. Or
Yeah,
chief
I mean, I'm
marketing
sure they would
officer
love the
full.
paycheck, but you don't necessarily need
Well, but that's
that.
the other thing. You might not be able to afford a chief operating officer full time,
Right.
too, right?
Right.
And so there's the cost savings, there's the right fit, and what I've found from working with some clients and also just in my own experience growing businesses is if you have a chief whatever full time and you're not there yet, so you don't have the budget, you're just not big enough, right? Like
Yeah.
a $1 million company doesn't need a CMO, they need a marketing manager, right? So if you have a CMO, you hire a CMO,
All the
they might,
CMOs are like,
yeah, sorry, but if you hire a full-time CMO, they're going to do full-time CMO things. You know what full-time
right.
CMOs like to do? Spend money,
Yeah.
right?
And they're going to be pushing the team. Hey, by the way, we're all involved in marketing, so we need information, we need pictures, we need content, we need da. And meanwhile, your team is just trying to get product out the door or trying to get their
Yep.
clients fulfilled. They can't even afford the additional work that's being generated by
Right.
a C-suite professional that is essentially doing what they've been asked to do.
Well, they're
And in
doing their
full-time
job,
capacity.
and they might
Yeah.
be they're doing exactly what they should be if they work for
Right.
a $20 million company,
Right.
right?
Exactly.
And this is why you see companies, you go to Microsoft and you go to a full-time employee at Microsoft, you ask them to pull up their Outlook calendar, and it's just they're in meetings all day, right? Cross-functional meetings, leadership meetings, status report meetings, right? And a small business can't sustain that level of bureaucracy. A large business, you could argue, shouldn't sustain that level
Well,
of.
based on the person that you referenced earlier, they have a different model of how much staff you actually need in a corporate organization. So,
Right. Well,
they're not wrong or they're not. I don't know. We will find out.
yeah. So, all right. So that's what fractional COO is. So let's say, tell me a little bit about what you do. You work with clients. It sounds a lot like what we do here at Nimdzi Insights. You come in. I hate this term, but it fits. You audit a company's processes. Yeah, I know. I always have to say that because we do audits too,
Yeah.
here at Nimdzi
Well,
Insights, and I always have to caveat. I hate that term, but if the shoe fits, wear it.
it's.
Right.
I mean, if you imagine a business like a car, right? You take it to the mechanic and you're like, "Hey, I need you to fix this thing," and the mechanic's like, "Okay, you're telling me what the problem is, but the way you're describing it, it sounds like it could be any number of these things. I need to go figure out what these things are doing and if they're built
Right.
correctly or broken, and right. So we do have to look under the hood. So I kind of approach a few different ways, and yeah, if I could get everyone organized, line them all up, and everyone does things the right way, right? So then first thing I do is an audit, look at everything that's happening in the business, benchmark everything, get everything measured and organized and structured to say like, hey, this is how you're working, this is the flow, here's how much work you're getting done, here's how much work these employees are doing, here's how things are structured and organized, here's all your documentation. Basically go through a checklist of all the things that they should have to make sure that their business can operate, one, without the owner, and two, eventually prep for a sale. Like there's always an exit. And so I think since I'm doing the work to even check what the business is doing, I should actually get the business in a place where we can evaluate its potential to run without the owner and potentially transition.
Well, and that's a good point. Sorry to
No, go ahead.
disrupt your flow here, but that's a really good point because every owner every owner should have a goal. Like, why are you doing this? Like when I sat down with my co-founder a long time ago, I said, what's the goal of founding this company? Is it to grow it? Is this our retirement plan? Is this, a lifestyle company? Is this to sell off in 5 years and make money? What's the goal here, right? And we had a goal. The goal has changed over the years, right? But everyone should at least understand like where they're going, because if your goal is to exit in 5 years, the decisions you make in year one need to be going towards that goal. Because here at Nimdzi Insights, we have an M&A practice where we help companies buy and sell, right? And every once in a while, you'll talk to someone who you reach out and say, "I want to sell my company. Can you help me with that?" Sure, but they're not set up to sell, right?
Yeah,
And
I mean I've done that. I've had conversations with business brokers, M&A folks, certified exit planners, and they basically tell what they've told me is like people come to them like, "Oh, I want to sell my business." Okay, great. When do you want to sell it? "Oh, tomorrow." Well, what planning did you do to get ready to sell? "Oh,
yeah,
nothing. I just somebody told me it's a 7x multiplier in revenue." And
yeah, exactly. They read an article somewhere,
yeah, and so
right?
they're like, "I'm ready to sell. Like, I want to cash out." And it's like, "Oh, most people I've talked to, it's a 5-year
Well,
process."
and it's like,
So
what accounting? This is my favorite. What accounting software do you use to keep your books? Excel. I'm like, oh,
yeah,
yeah, we're gonna have to
yeah.
do
That's
some
I mean,
work.
at least it's 2 steps above an abacus and a piece of paper and a pen.
Right.
So, but yeah, I think you know they need to know what, like you were saying, they need to know what their goal is and what their plan is. And then at some point, if you are going to exit, you definitely need at least 5 years to get ready for that. You need to identify who's going to do it. You need to make sure the owner's ready. I mean, there's a whole checklist of things. So um but yeah, no, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I got excited because I was like,
Well,
yeah, it's a 5-year consideration.
you
So
yeah, you interrupted me because I was interrupting you. But I think where we were getting at here, I was checking out your website. So for those on LinkedIn or YouTube, it should be down in the description. I'm linking to Think Adapt Build LLC. I'm gonna pull that up right now. Because when I was poking around here earlier, I found this process mapping, visualize your processes, and
yeah.
this looks super interesting. I was hoping maybe you could just walk us through this.
Oh yeah. So this is an example. So when we talk about like entry points, I always have people that are like, "Oh, I just need help with one thing." I'm like, "Great. What's the one thing you need help with?"
Right.
And they're like, "Oh, we have this process that's not working." And so I drew up a little quick visual of what I do and how I approach this. So like the version 1 of this, you can see this is people are like, "Oh, our client intake process is perfect." I'm like, "Okay, great." Let's map it out and see how it lines up. But so this is version 1, um, and it's just a quick, simple formula. So the customer fills out the application, they hand it over to customer service. Is the application complete? No. Now they got to follow up with the customer. So then they hand it back to sales. Sales then has to go call and figure out where the information is, and then they put the application back in. The application is complete. It goes to AR, an invoice is sent, and the order is fulfilled. That's kind of convoluted and kind of complicated. And so if you look down below, what we do is we take those sequences. Oh, sorry, just a little bit up above. So we take those
Okay.
sequences and we lay them out here. And so you can see it takes 10 minutes to do one part, 30 minutes for the next one. And so the whole process takes about 2 days because there's delays. The D's are like little delays.
Okay.
So it takes 2 days, 1 hour and 45 minutes. And so if you go to version 2, so what we did we did a little process improvement. Customer fills out the application, and now we ask the question of sales: is the application 100% complete? No. Okay, then guess what? You need to follow up with that person and get the application 100% complete. So then when sales goes to pass it to customer service, they only pass 100% complete applications. That means there's no delay or almost minimal delay.
Right.
It goes to customer service. They do the application, gets sent into AR, invoice is sent out, and it's sent to fulfillment. And then customer service follows up with it. If you scroll down, we do the timing and math of what we saved. So total time version for 1 is 2 days, 1 hour and 45 minutes. Total version for 2 is 1 hour and 50 minutes. And so essentially we save ourselves 2 days and 5 minutes.
Wow.
So, and that was just one small thing that sales can't turn in applications unless they're 100% correct.
And that's amazing what when you really start looking at processes and putting them on a piece of paper like this, putting them on a whiteboard, right? And just taking that time, because everyone's usually, especially in that $1 to $5 million size company, everyone's so busy, right? Who has time to go to an offsite for a week and huddle around a whiteboard with bad catered pastries, right?
And sticky notes.
And don't forget the sticky notes. The sticky notes. Oh, the sticky notes. We have a guy on our team, Roman, who's we call him the sticky note guru because he's magician. Anyways, I won't go into sticky notes.
I mean, guru though, you have to have at least like 20 different color.
Oh, of course. Yeah, of course. Yes. And there's a whole different podcast. Different podcast. But it's important, right? But like my colleague Roman, he can sit down with our company. I've seen him do it for internal purposes, and he can sit down with our clients' companies and spend 2 days in a room with them and just lock the door, get out the sticky notes, and this is the kind of stuff that you find. But everyone's too busy to realize this. You just need to, lock the door and make sure that you're mapping out these processes and asking why. Right? Yeah. Asking why is important. Well, why do we do it this way? And if the answer is because this is how we've always done it, not a good answer. Right?
I mean, they're not wrong, but it's not going to get you to move forward, and it's not going to help you improve.
Well, I should say maybe it is a good answer, but it requires additional explanation, right? Because maybe it's the way that we've always done it and there's a good reason for that, but in isolation, because it's the way that we've always done it, isn't necessarily. It's like, okay, well, why is it the way that we've always done it? Well, because we need this, this, and this. Well, why do we need this, this, and this, right?
And I've actually found, and I think what you're kind of tickling on a little bit is it could also be the interpretation of what the expectation was at the time that someone kind of put that in place, but they didn't really think through it, right? So it was that one person that was like, hey, we just need to get the applications over to customer service as fast as possible. Mm-hmm. And nobody thought like, oh, eventually this is going to cause a lot of problem and it's going to cause all these like delays. And so, but at the core, they want sales to get things to customer service as fast as possible. So I think I think asking that why is a good.
Yeah, if your first 5 companies or if your first 5 clients as a company are all government contracts, then you have a very meticulous, most likely, way of onboarding a new client, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Now, then if you go into the private sector and start onboarding some Silicon Valley companies, some startup companies, right? Or someone that's not a government, your processes aren't going to apply so much anymore,
yeah. I mean, I see this when people are like, oh, here's our main client group we're going after. Now we want to add a second group that we're going to go after. I'm like, oh gosh, what's the overlay on like their demographics and profiles? And it's like, oh, two concentric circle or 2 circles, and they're like, just a small sliver of coverage. You're like, okay, are you ready to build version 3.0 of this business? Because you can't do the same. You can't treat them the same. It doesn't work that way.
You can't. Like when I remember when Nimdzi started out, most of our clients, especially in that first year, they were handshake deals built on relationships and a promise, right?
Yeah.
And I'd like to think we delivered on that promise, but now, we're a larger company and, people don't want to see promises. They want to see guarantees. They want to see SLAs. They want to know what our InfoSec policy is.
Oh.
Right? They want to see ISO certifications. And so all of that different stuff, it changes over time.
Yeah. And the work that you're doing now is probably different than you were doing when you first got started.
Absolutely.
And so, no, it's fun. I think, at the core, there's a kind of a chassis or kind of a foundational elements, like when you look at humans, somebody here, somebody in Africa, somebody in Australia, somebody in China, like we have more similarities than we have differences. And so it's those similarities and those like core elements of what it is to be human. Same thing with business. There's clients, there's delivery, there's finance, there's all these core pieces that need to get built. And sometimes as you grow, you do what it takes to get by or get things done, but you didn't get some of those foundational elements. And so I think with operations, like, we can kind of come in and help build those structures and get those foundational elements in place.
Well, you mentioned foundational elements. In your experience, how typically, and I know it varies greatly depending upon the company and the industry and all of that stuff, but how often do you have to rebuild the foundation? Right? You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
do you come across those cases where you're like, this is kind of, we need to break everything and rebuild it? Or do you find that incremental changes built upon a foundation that's not necessarily bad, but it's not a good fit for the current growth trajectory?
Oh my gosh, I love this question because I always think of the new boat paradigm, right? Like how much of a boat
Oh, the both of
parts
Theseus, the both
yeah,
of,
so like how much of a boat can you replace until eventually you have a new boat, right? Like at what point are you restoring the boat or did you actually build a new
yeah,
boat? Like can you keep
the
it?
ship of Theseus.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's that paradox, right? So same
Exactly.
with the business. It's so what I've found in my engagements, service-based businesses, founder-led, means that the personality driven and that the owner is the brand. And so trying to separate those two, that's a challenge.
Yes, and that has been, like I said, that first year of our company, it was
Yeah.
very largely like relationship driven, driven. I mean, me and my co-founder, when we found it, no one knew who the hell I was, right? But everyone knew my business partner, right?
Right, right.
He was the product, he was the sales team, he was he was it, right?
And then
And
you jump on the call. So then all of a sudden they're like, wait, what happened? Like,
well, yeah, exactly. Like, who the heck's this guy, right? And like, yeah, I'm the guy that's gonna be delivering all the crazy shit he's promising you, right? So
yeah.
that's how I would introduce myself.
And then you got the memo from the other guy, right? Because we just want to make sure like that you guys, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But
So
eventually, you need to shift from people being fans of a personality, people being friends with the CEO, to people being followers of the brand, and that can be a
right,
hard shift.
right. So then when we talk about like rebuilding or restructuring, it's the um separating the founder from the brand and building the brand itself. And then it's also trying to take everything that's in their head and make sure that goal is outlined and then there's everything is aligned to that vision.
Mm-hmm.
And for most part, you know, I think most businesses probably get 80% of it right. And so we come in and we don't have to change too much or do too much undoing. Um, but I had a buddy of mine that was working with a clothing designer and younger. She overnight success, like huge, bought a warehouse, did all these like crazy, what I would say crazy things, obviously to like fulfill what she was doing, but she had to make decisions really quick. And so when you looked at how she built and put everything together, my friend was like, oh my gosh, we got to like unpack and redo a lot of this stuff because they built these systems and ordering and fulfillment. And it's just very like they're ordering way more than they need because they have minimum orders and they weren't prepared for this. And sales is not stacking up orders, from customers. And there's just all these bits and pieces that are wrong. And so he had to say like, hey, let's pause for like a day and like let's go through this and get a clear outline of how this all is working. And then I'm going to let you know, we're probably going to have to cut back to about, where we were 6 months ago and try to redo and undo some of these decisions because, you didn't need all this warehouse space. You've got an empty warehouse. I know you're going to grow, but you experience a really great growth now, but you're not using the rest of this warehouse space. And this is a huge liability for you. And
It's the same root challenge we were talking about with fractional leadership, right? It's like you don't need a whole warehouse. You don't need a whole chief COO, right?
yeah,
You just need something that's going to be able to scale without getting locked into contracts that you can't afford based upon wishful thinking.
Yeah. So I think with most of the businesses, the ones that I deal with, they're usually dying from success. And so
Go
the
ahead.
nice thing about that is the money is coming in and the clients are generally okay. So we got to stop the churn or the burn on that, get that fixed. We get the key employees, buttoned up, knowing either what exactly they're doing or where they're at capacity or what knowledge they're holding on to and they're bottlenecking a little bit. We identify those things. Um, and then we just kind of build in some foundations. And, you know, this is where the nice thing about fractional is you get to test and try different people out. And so I might not be the flavor of tea that you want to do this work,
Yep.
I I'm of the mindset that slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And so I want to slow things down to a point where, like a spinning wheel that's in ice, you're not going to get traction. So we need to slow it down to a place where we're actually getting traction. And so based on the ground that we have, we're moving at the right speed. And so if we can improve the ground on that and get it tighter, incrementally now, take a little bit longer to get this part fixed, it's going to give you way more traction in the future and it's going to set you up in a way better spot. But there are some people, in this space that they're SaaS experts. They know how to scale from 1 million to 10 million to 100 million. And it's a rocket ship ride. And they're like, screw the road. We're just going to throw us on a rocket and go.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
they're great. Hire them. Like maybe that's the person you need or that person you want. But and then with fractionals, like you really should be hiring for a skills gap. When we put those like qualifications of why you would hire a fractionals person, what skill gap does that person bring? What's that network that they have too? They're going
Yeah.
to bring to the table. So
Yeah, and I see this when growing a company. It can be challenging. I've seen this with a lot of companies that we've worked with. Is you grow a company from yourself to your first 5 employees to 10 employees to 20 employees, and I think there's a very understandable and righteous desire to reward loyalty, right?
yeah,
So that employee number 2, employee number 1, employee number 5 that's been with you for the last 6 years, you hired them straight out of college and they were working for peanuts. There's this thought that, well, they've been with us, they should be leading the operations because they earned it. No one knows this company like this person, right? And I commend that because I value loyalty, right? I value that. But what I've realized as a business person, you kind of have to separate the needs of the business from all of that stuff. And because a lot of times, sometimes that person's a great fit, right?
right.
But a lot of times that person that you hired to be the secretary 10 years ago doesn't have the skills to be the CMO today, right? Do you come across that?
Yeah, definitely. And in fact, it's one of what I would say the biggest challenges on the operations side is when you promote somebody from, and I'm just going to use like a manufacturing analogy, but
Sure.
you get some of the front line, right? That becomes a supervisor, then becomes a manager, then becomes a director, then becomes a VP. They tend to hold on to the previous roles that they had because they had that experience. And so they drag that with them.
Yeah.
And at some point,
The Peter principle, right?
yeah, and at
Yeah.
some point you're gonna have to cut workforce by 10% or 20%. And an executive has to be able to make that decision, knowing that they care about these people and everything, but it's a decision that has to be made because sales are down or because
Yeah.
economic conditions or whatever. They have to be able to have that mindset and be able to do that top down leadership and execute. And I've actually been brought in a few times where I identify my replacement. Like, I'm here as a fractional, you're growing,
Yeah.
you're going to get to a revenue point that I'm not going to continue with you because I'm building my business. My business is to help you build your business, but to a point,
Yeah.
then at that point, you can take that employee and then basically replace me. But I'm going to tell you, they need to read these books. They need to take these
Right.
kind of classes. They need to there's just some leveling up. I get so much. I'm not a great people person, but so because I see them as like functional units, like human capital. If you
Yes.
were to put
The
it into a
resources.
bucket, yeah, I know,
Right.
I know. So they're buckets
Yeah.
of human capital, and so you want to develop that, and so
Don't read the comments on this
I know,
podcast
seriously,
afterwards.
I
We're
know.
pissing all
People are
sorts of
like,
people off.
but but if you see the people as like human machines on some level, capacity to learn and grow and everything else, you got to retool them, and some machines are some people. I'm gonna go to
And
people
it doesn't mean that they're bad people.
Oh no,
No, it doesn't mean
seriously,
that they're bad employees. It doesn't mean that
no.
they're not good at what they do. It just means as the company changes, the needs of the company change, and maybe they're a bad fit. I've had team members that I practically begged to leave. Before we had two bed quarters in a row and we had to lay them off, right?
Yeah,
Which
yeah,
eventually happened. But prior to that, I was begging them to leave for years.
yeah,
Why? Not because I didn't want them. They were great, right? But I
yeah.
knew that I could never afford to pay them what they were worth. And I was holding them back, right? Because they need to go work for a big company and triple their salary overnight.
But they got experience and insight from you that they might not have gotten had they gone the corporate route.
I'd like to
So
think so, right?
yeah, right. I mean, but I think when we look at, and this, I actually have a resource on so if you go to my website, there's a resource page and it's barriers to process change. And if anybody wants to take a look at it, these are common problems that you have when you try to change things. And I think people identify with the process. And so when you go to change the process, like they feel like, no, that's me you're trying to change. And it's like, no, we're just trying to change the way this thing works. And so when you talk about your growth and what you've experienced, that people that you hired at that stage of business were great for that stage of business because they
Absolutely.
operated well as generalists. Things change every day. We're all in discovery mode. That's great. But once you start getting things figured out and solidified, then the business needs change, which means the staffing changes, the service changes, even the clients can change. And so for the health of the business and for the survival of the business, you have to start making internal changes and shifts. So to your point, like when you're trying to get your employees out of there, it's because you knew this change was coming and you needed to stack the deck a little bit differently.
Right.
And it's because you care about them. You're trying to send them off to go fly.
Yeah. And
So
also, I'll just bring this up too. You mentioned, COVID and the various disruptions that happened during that. But it used to be you'd hire people because like you were limited to your local talent pool because you wanted
right.
people in the office, right? And nowadays, if you're limiting yourself to the local talent pool, then you're missing out on a lot of great talent out there. And frankly, sorry, proud to be an American and all that stuff, but frankly, there's a lot of great talent outside of the US.
What?
Right? The vast majority of
Exactly.
my team members, I'm a
Yeah.
minority. I'm the boring white American. Everyone's European, South American, all over the place, right?
Yeah.
And because of that, we're able to get great talent without, if I was stuck trying to find someone in this town, first of all, I couldn't afford someone in this town. I live in Seattle, right? So
Oh,
I'm competing with
yeah.
Amazon
Yeah.
for talent. I can't compete with Amazon for talent.
They're like, you should come work for me because you can get a parking spot right
Because you don't have to wear pants.
Right. Just put a sign up on the door.
And
No,
that's why I need a fractional HR officer.
actually, we got to be careful because you said you have a European crowd, and pants mean a whole nother thing. So
It's fair. Okay.
yeah,
So we'll
yeah,
just
we gotta
pull that from that.
But yeah, I think this is where small businesses can gain advantage. To your point, is pulling talent from outside the U.S. I have a VA in the Philippines. I've hired people from Canada to work on programming elements. I have a client of mine that uses programmers in South America, and so the exchange rate is favorable, and so they pay the equivalent of a great wage down in that country, which happens to be on the U.S. side cheaper, and so I think this is where you can have competitive advantage because locally, if everybody's hiring local talent and I don't mean to like sound rude about it, but like limited, you're limited in the communities that you're in. So Seattle, great, you've got a great pool of people to pull from, but resource wise, they're very expensive.
Right.
Whereas, if you're in a small town in the Midwest, and you don't,
It's
nobody knows how to.
affordable, but not as deep of a pool,
Right. So
right?
maybe there's nobody knows how to program Python or something,
Yeah.
And you need a Python programmer. So, you're like, oh, I need to relocate to another city. No, no, no. Just go online and find someone
Yeah.
that can provide that good or service. So I think COVID has accelerated that what we were on the train track for. I think it
Yeah.
accelerated that.
It was the
I
great
don't
accelerator. We would have
yeah,
gotten there
yeah.
eventually,
Yeah.
but
Like
COVID
somebody was like,
forced our
"Oh,
hand.
this is all new and this is da da da," and it's like, no, 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 it's not new. It's just we got
No.
there faster.
Well,
So
in my industry, I've been doing translation, right?
yeah,
And so translation's been inherently a global industry since its conception, obviously, right?
yeah.
So it's like for our industry, it was kind of like, yeah, we're already doing this.
Well,
Right.
and I've met people that are in the fractional space that have been doing, part time. They called it part time C-suite work because, someone would love them, think they're great, and they're like, okay, I can only afford you to pay you X, and the person's like, no, I can't do that, but I'll work less hours in the week, and they're like, yeah, let's do it. So people have been doing fractional work before that was a thing.
Yeah.
So remote work, same thing. So yeah, I think there's a great opportunity to hire people from other countries and understand that there is a level of complexity with that though, because cultural differences,
There
time
is.
difference.
There's the cultural
So
differences, there's the time differences, and frankly, like I'll say what it's not, it's not a popular thing to say, but it's challenging managing a remote team, right? If
yeah,
they're in the office, you have as a manager, it's a lot easier to manage an office of employees because you know what they're working on, right?
and you get you have to pay for it too. That's the other part. Like there's one of my clients that I was talking to, and she was using all remote workers, and I was like, okay, but you can't tell them when to work.
Right.
Can't give them, if you're gonna pay them 1099 or W9. By the way, I'm not a lawyer. I'm just giving the advice that's
Hashtag not
recommended
legal
out there.
advice. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But when you look at what an employee is and what a 1099 worker is, it's on the spectrum. And so every decision you make, it puts them one step closer to one or the other. And so when they have to use your equipment, they have to be at your location, you dictate their hours, right? Those are all employees. Great. That means you have more control over what their inputs, outputs, process, all that, right?
But you
The
also got to buy
remote,
those computers and pay an IT guy to set them up,
yes,
and
yeah, and then you got taxes and everything else, and then
exactly.
on the remote side, then you got the asynchronous work, and so you have to be careful that you don't treat them like employees, because then you might actually have to you know do the whole W-2 business with them. And so if they're contractors, you're not a primary source of income and they have flexibility and they're not using your equipment, great. Then, you know, they get the freedom and the
Just
experience of that too.
just stay out of California. Is all I'm saying.
Yeah, right. No,
Play
if
it
you're
safe.
California based,
I'm
if you're California based, it's California and New York and like
Yeah,
one other
exactly.
state.
Just
Yeah.
don't watch,
Yeah.
read their local regulations.
Yes. Please follow them and ignore anything I just said.
Absolutely. The best advice we've had, the two of us have had all podcast, I think is right there. Ignore everything we just said.
Hashtag not legal advice.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, sir, I'm watching the clock here. I think we're kind of running out of time here.
Yeah.
I want to turn it back over to you though. I feel like I've got a better idea like what you do. I loved the process doc and everything going over that. I want to send that to my team after this. Any other closing thoughts? Anything we forgot to mention? Tell me about your company. Tell me what you do. How can people reach out to you?
Yeah, so Think Adapt Build, we are basically operations consulting, helping business owners figure out how to manage their growth and basically regain control. And I used to be director of economic development and saw so many different businesses grow and fail and succeed in so many different ways. And so um, basically what we want to do is just help people understand entrepreneurship, what it is to own a business, and then all those different operational components they need to get in order. And yeah, I don't know, I just want to help people run better businesses, because if our local businesses are running better, it means we have better local communities. because small businesses hire locally. They tend to hire locally, and they tend to spend locally, and so it's a way for us to keep that community kind of spirit alive, as opposed to everything going to mega corporations and having to deal with that. So anyway,
unless you're me, and then I'm helping the Czech Republic economy grow.
yeah. See, there you go.
So I'm a globalized altruist, let's call it.
Hey, listen, I think if you can find community in however you define that,
I have
great.
found that's the
Yeah.
thing is like I'm joking, of course, when I say these things, but it's like I have like my global community.
Yeah.
Right. We have team members from all over the globe. South America, everywhere.
Yeah.
And they're my people.
Yeah.
Man, it's crazy. We come together for an offsite. We try to once every year or two, and it's great. Like we have this international community. It's awesome.
Oh, I have a client that he has international folks, and he is so excited because he gets to pay a living wage where people can afford to buy a house, they can afford to buy a car, like they can afford to send their cousin to college, like all these cool economic opportunities that he gets to create for other people because he's leveraging people in other locations.
Yeah.
I mean,
You're
it's great.
As an entrepreneur, if that's important to you, you can make a much bigger difference hiring a team of developers in Colombia, as far as like supporting a local economy, putting food on families' tables, all of that stuff. You can make a much bigger difference doing that than you can hiring people in San Francisco. You could probably only hire one of them.
Yeah, right. That's a different, that's probably a conversation for another day. But
next podcast.
Yeah, just listen. If you're a small business owner listening to this, take a step back from your business. Think about how your business runs and operates. If you're the choke point, consider hiring someone to help you deal with those different components and build those pieces out. That's the message that I'd like to pass on.
And I would probably say it's probably more affordable than you think it is, if it's something that you're considering it.
Yeah.
Especially when you take into account the cost of not doing it. So
there's the rub.
Right. Yeah, you can tell I've pitched a few consulting projects in my days. Alrighty, sir. Awesome. I will take us out here. Ladies, gentlemen, guests, we are out of time for today. I appreciate our guest, Joshua. I appreciate my colleagues here at Nimdzi Insights doing all of the hard work so I can have these interesting conversations. And finally, I appreciate you, the audience, joining us live today, watching the recordings on YouTube, listening to the recordings on the podcast. Thank you so much for all the questions, comments, and conversations. I look forward to next time. Cheers.
Thank you.